Right. I think it's best if I just record my screen. I can take you through the way that I've set up my profiles with Simplify 3D. Um, there's a load of things that can affect your print quality, from the type of filament you're using, the color of the filament. There's all sorts of things that are going to affect the overall quality. So looking at the part that you've printed, I'd say yes, you're not extruding enough plastic, and there may be a couple of reasons for that. The first thing we need to do, I think you need to do, is you need to be doing print some calibration cubes. Whenever I'm in trouble with this sort of thing, I'll start with a simple calibration cube for a couple of reasons. I know it's going to print, so there's not going to be any problem with the STL file along those lines. It's small, you can print it quickly, you can cancel it, you can change the settings quickly, so it's the sort of go-to calibration tool that a lot of people use. Okay, so I've dropped a 20x20 calibration cube onto my build plate. I've loaded the process profile that I'd uploaded in this post. It's changed since then, but I will stick with that one. Firstly, I think you need to realise that one setting on my machine, on my printer, is not necessarily going to work on your printer, even if it's exactly the same filament, etc. They'll be close, but they won't be the same. Every printer is going to work differently. So a lot of this is getting to know your printer. I'm no expert in the field. I've been printing since 3D printing since probably July this year. So I'm just passing on what I've learned. And like I said, I'm not saying that this is the right way of doing it or the wrong way of doing it. It's just the way that I've done it, and it seems to be working. So first, what we need to do is, before we do any printing, measure your filament. So if you get a pair of verniers, or haven't got a pair of verniers, get a pair of verniers. Really useful to have around, because what we need to do is measure the diameter of the filament over a length of the filament. So don't just take one measurement, take 10 measurements, and don't take it all in the same sort of orientation on the filament. Actually move it, because the filament sometimes is oval, so you need to get a good average for the diameter of the filament, because that will affect how much plastic is being extruded in your parts. Once you've got an average for your filament, what we then need to do is then pop that dimension into this field here, filament diameter, 1.7 at the moment. Yours might come out at 1.3 or 1.8, or somewhere along there. Hopefully you've got good, decent quality filament with a decent tolerance on it. So you should be right on about that figure. But don't worry if you're not. It's just important that you put that the figure for that particular filament that you're using in here. Obviously, when you change spools and change filaments and colors and stuff, you need to do the same again. So it's quite nice again to just write in this diameter on your spool when you're putting it away. Another thing I found is you might print fine at the beginning of the spool, and then towards the end of the spool things are going wrong again. It's jamming, or it's not extruding enough plastic. Don't take it for granted that the diameter is the same as the beginning. So one of the things you need to get into the habit of doing is checking the diameter of the filament. So once you've got that in, plug it into this, open your process and type it in here, correct this field here. Okay. Right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to print a cube, well, the beginnings of a cube really, with 2 layers on the base and then just one shell. Because what we need to do is actually measure that shell. Okay, so what I normally do is have 2 base layers and then just one shell, and just wait until the print gets to about 10 mil high, and then we'll take our vernier again and measure the thickness of the wall on that, and again we'll take that measurement from several places and get an average for it. Ideally, for a extrusion diameter of 0.4 and 0.2 layer height, you want about 0.4 extrusion width. But that's not necessarily the best way to print with any particular filament. Like I say, one figure in here will work really well with one extrusion, and with another it won't. I think your default settings when you first start Simplify 3D, I think this value is up at 1 or even 0.9. I can't remember what the default value is. It's very, very high, and effectively you're pumping out way too much plastic. So Engine was really useful, and he posted a few profiles for the Replicator 2, not the 2X, on Thingiverse, and a lot of what I started with was based on his really good work. So I left my extrusion multiplier at 0.5, and what we'll do is we'll print the cube, like I say, with two. So we're going to the layers. We want to set the top to 0, because it's going to be like an open box. Not that we're going to get to the end of the print. Bottom layers we set to 2, and then perimeter we want 1 shell. So all we want is the 1 shell going round for halfway up or 3/4 up the cube, and then we need to measure it. I mean, the great thing about the cubes is they do print quickly, so you're not really wasting your time. Okay, so once that's done, save it, and obviously print your part and see how you get on. The other thing you need to do, sorry I forgot to say, is as well as setting your layers, just go into your infill and make sure you turn this to 0. Yeah, because you don't want any infill. All we're interested in doing is printing a wall, a single shell wall, to measure the thickness of that wall. Okay. Okay, I'm just looking at the preview of the single shell cube. Like I say, you can just constantly print at this sort of height. As standard now, I've got into the habit of putting about at least 3 skirts on for a couple of reasons. Primarily, get your extruder up to speed before it starts on the part for real, and also it's a nice check to make sure that your build plate's level and that the filament is adhering to the build plate. So you can cancel out a lot of your problems just by watching how the skirt goes down. Obviously, you should always watch that first layer and make sure that first layer has gone down as you anticipated. So this is what we're looking to measure, the single wall, and then once we've got that measurement, then we'll put it back into the software. Okay, so obviously when you're taking your measurements, take it from several points, yeah, and just take the average, and that's what we'll use to start with. Okay, so once you get your average thickness of a single wall, go back into your process, okay, and then you want to make sure that this box is unticked, and then you want to put your extrusion width, effectively how thick your wall is, in there. That's the average for your wall. Okay, so once that's done, what we'll do next is we'll print the cube again with two bottom layers, but this time 2 shells. And what we're after doing is seeing if those 2 shells are fusing together correctly. And now, if the software thinks that the extrusion width is bigger than what it actually is, then that's what's going to leave you with the gaps between your shells. Okay, so hopefully you've printed the cube. And what you need to do now is inspect, stop it after about 10 minutes and have a look to see if you've got good fusion between the 2 shells. So you've got the green and the blue bit over here. I've got some photographs that I'll just put up quickly. Okay, so basically here are some tests. So there's a single wall that we've measured. This is a double wall, and we've got perfect fusion on it. It's fused perfectly. So this is what we're looking to achieve. This is where we've set our diameter, our extrusion, what do they call it? Extrusion width. So if your extrusion width is too wide, too big, then the slicing software is expecting a bigger shell to be laid than is actually laid, and therefore you get a gap, if that makes any sense. So in this case, what you need to do, if this is what you're getting, you need to either reduce the width reduce the width, the extrusion width, so you reduce that. So, or you can tweak the extrusion multiplier. So this is basically going to do is just going to push through more plastic, and therefore hopefully squash out and make it a little bit wider, the width. So I mean, the first thing I'll do is make sure my gap's good, make sure the build place is level, etc., etc., and then I'll play with this one a little bit and get it so that those two shells are touching and fusing. This is perfect. Maybe a little bit too much plastic coming through, but that's really good. So look at the other one. See the other one? Oh, that's just another single wall. So this is basically what you're looking for before you go to the next stage. Once you achieve in this, then what I suggest you do is actually print the cube and actually set your layers. So you have top layer, just have this as a single top layer. Have a single bottom layer, one perimeter, and then set your infill to 100%, and set this to rectangular. Concentric works really well as well, because it's a lot, because it just goes round rather than a zigzag. But I expect that the rectangular one's stronger, so you can have a play around with those. Once you've got that, you should end up with a good solid cube of plastic. Once you're achieving that and got all that working right, then have a go with your original design. And there's no reason why it shouldn't work out the way you want it to work out. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know whether you've got these as a solid fill, on your lettering over here. If you do want this as a solid fill, then you really need to make sure that that your two shells are touching. If you've got double shell, but it looks like you just got the one shell in there. Another thing that would cause that, or could possibly cause that not filling with the infill, is the minimum length of infill. You might want to change this right down to, I don't know whether you can actually set to 0, but bring that right down, and therefore whatever's there, it'll try and fill it. This is where actually thinking about your design and how you're going to print it really pays off up front. Let's just pop back to, yeah, because what I'll do, I'll try and work out how many layers I would need to do something like that, roughly, which is what I've been doing, but this might be a little bit more difficult. But there's no reason why this shouldn't print solid. Like I say, just if you want this completely solid, I'll just use one shell on the bottom, one shell at the top and print it solid, 100% full. If you don't want it 100% full, then you probably want to do at least 2 shells on the skirts and the top and the bottom, and set your infill at about, I don't know, between 15 and 20%, and hopefully that will get you somewhere close. But like I said before, I'm no expert. Yeah, this is just the way that I've been approaching it, and every day I'm learning something new. So tomorrow I could be saying something completely different. Please let us know how you get on, and I hope you have some good luck. It looks like you made good progress anyway, so I'll be checking back to see you again